Welcome to Defiant Nation Radio, where we defy the narrative that our culture is feeding us. We defy the idea that the scriptures cannot be trusted, and we defy the idea that the God of the Bible does not exist. We defy the idea that we have evolved from monkeys. At Defiant Nation Radio, we uphold the solas of the Reformation. We uphold the scriptures. We believe that salvation is by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone. Defiant Nation Radio is the podcast ministry of EternityAtStake.com.
Hey guys, so with the news coming out lately, I want to give you a little bit more news update and a little bit more information on Ron Burns, or otherwise known as Thabiti Anyabwile. Give a little bit of insight into his past and maybe some of his present day thinking and why he is such a movement in this, or such a force in this social justice movement era. But a little bit of news, Planned Parenthood claimed that they had over 11,000 more abortions last year than they had normally, brought in $1.67 billion in revenue. And on the back of that, then we hear that New York passed this historic abortion bill legalizing the killing of unborn babies until birth, expands who is allowed to provide abortions, and scrubs abortion from the state's criminal code. This is from Daily Wire by James Barrett. It says the Democrat-controlled New York State Senate passed an historic abortion bill Tuesday that legalizes the killing of unborn babies until birth, expands who is allowed to provide abortions, and scrubs abortion from the state's criminal code. Upon the passage of the euphemistically titled Reproductive Health Act, Planned Parenthood New York took to social media to celebrate by posting videos showing abortion activists erupting in applause and cheers in the New York State Senate. The New York State Senate just made history and passed the Reproductive Health Act on the anniversary of Roe v. Wade. They tweeted on Tuesday. This Reproductive Health Act declares that every individual who becomes pregnant has the fundamental right to choose to carry the pregnancy to term, to give birth to the child, or to have an abortion. It effectively wipes out the 24-week limit on abortion by specifying that a woman has the right to abort her child up to the child's birth date, so long as an authorized healthcare practitioner determines in reasonable, quote-unquote, and good faith professional judgment that the birth of a child could potentially hurt the mother's life or health, and health is being defined in so many different ways in this process here. So it is definitely historic and definitely sad, as we see the March for Life just went on, got absolutely no coverage unless you're watching a few select sources, but definitely in the mainstream media got absolutely no coverage. And such a sad day for America and for the lives that have been lost and will be lost in the future to abortion. So just want to give you a little bit of an update on that. If you haven't heard anything about it, check that out. But I wanted to also, I've mentioned Ron Burns, Thabiti Anyabwile, a few times so far, and I know I'm just getting started, but I'm working on, as I said, putting together this study of socialism, social justice, and the theology. What are we as Christians called to do, or what is the gospel? Is social justice a part of the gospel, which is the claim that a lot of these guys are making? The claim that the gospel is supposed to change structures. And so I want to give you a little bit more background on Thabiti. And this is published by Seth Dunn. It's called The Black History of Ron Simmons and Ron Burns. Ron Simmons, kind of a little funny thing that he does here with some old wrestling guys, and Ron Burns, Thabiti Anyabwile, who advocates for Bernie Sanders, the socialist communist Bernie Sanders. Thabiti advocating for him. I want to give you a little bit of his background as Seth is writing here. He says, in 1988, a native North Carolinian named Ron Burns was a freshman in college. It was then that Burns first encountered members of the Muslim faith. Shortly thereafter, he converted to Islam. Burns grew up in a nominally Christian home as the youngest of 8 children, born to a mother who never married. He was the only child of his mother and his father. When he was 13 years old, his father left the family. Burns did not have much of a relationship with his father after that. Like so many youths who grow up fatherless in broken homes, Burns became an angry man. He began reading the literature of the 60s radicals, which was given to him by a high school teacher. According to Burns, this was like giving fire to a pyromaniac. Burns was drawn to Islam by what he has called their black nationalist ideology. He resolved to commit to black nationalist causes, the building of black businesses, the development of black communities. Part of this commitment was changing his name to the very African-sounding Thabiti Anyabwile, which is a combination of a Swahili term for a true man and upright, and an Arabic term that means God has set me free. After college, Thabiti Anyabwile got married and took a job as a community organizer at a nonprofit. This is where I think some of the big movement in Thabiti's push for this social justice comes from. It is from him being a community organizer. If you don't know what that is, Obama was a community organizer. This is a way to push Marxism, cultural Marxism, into the culture. I'll talk more about that in the future. After college, Thabiti Anyabwile got married and took a job as a community organizer at a nonprofit. He was a respected man at work in his community, but something wasn't right in his life: Islam. Anyabwile, after wrestling with his faith, came to reject Islam and embrace Christianity. However, even after having become a professional Christian minister, Anyabwile has kept his black nationalist Muslim name. Thabiti Anyabwile markets himself as something of an expert in the black community and the African American church. Going on to author a book entitled The Decline of African American Theology from Biblical Faith to Cultural Captivity. Perhaps this is why he has kept his quote-unquote blacker name, yet Thabiti Anyabwile is no more Muslim or African than Farouk Assad, the wrestler that he mentions, the funny thing he mentioned at the beginning of the article. Christianity is a religion that is supposed to overcome all ethnic barriers, making its adherents one nation in God's church. Yet Ron Burns of the American South, a Christian pastor, seems to still strongly identify with black nationalism and a radical social justice idea. These are the things I'm trying to kind of put into a logical format so you can hear them, understand them, make sense of them a little bit, and why there are so many problems with social justice. And we need to have an answer, as I've said before, for that. And we need to be loving in our answer for that. We need to have a well-thought-out answer, biblically dealing with things like, because these are the hot-button issues, right? Immigration, slavery, right? All these things, we need to have a well-thought-out answer for that. We need to have it, share it lovingly, caringly, and whether a person is a Christian or not, we need to have these conversations. Obviously, they are big conversations that have needed to happen for a while, but we're seeing this attack on especially the conservative evangelical church. Most of the other churches, the mainline churches, things like that, those who have been involved in the emergent church, those who have been involved in the New Apostolic Reformation over the last 20, 30 years, they are all ready for the social justice movement. So there's kind of this last bastion of the conservative evangelical movement, the conservative evangelical church, that has held out on this and has not been willing to compromise. So stay tuned. We'll talk more about it and get you more information as I'm able. Thanks. Thanks, guys. Bye.
If you're interested in learning more, preparing yourself better to witness, go to the website eternityatstake.com. We have several series on there. One of them is Maps from the Ancients. It covers manuscripts, archaeology, prophecy, science, and the resurrection. How do we know the Bible can be trusted? It's great for a homeschool study, great for a Sunday school class, great for an adult or teen class as well. We also have the Light Project, where I look at 8 cults and world religions, examining them. What do they do with God, with Christ, with the Bible, with salvation, heaven, hell, and things like that? Check it out today. Thanks for listening.